The Valkyrie had been watching Earth for 20 years. They watched humans build their cities on new worlds. They watched them argue in their governments. They watched them create music and art and silly entertainment programs. And they laughed at what they saw done to the Valkyrie. Humans were like children playing in a garden while a wolf waited in the shadows. The children did not know the wolf was there. They did not know that the wolf had eaten many gardens before theirs. They simply played and laughed and believed the universe was safe. Supreme Commander the Sark stood on the observation deck of his flagship and looked at the distant yellow star that humans called their sun. He was tall, even for his species, with scales the color of deep water and eyes that had watched 3 civilizations burn. His people had conquered 17 species over 15,000 years. Not one of those species had seen them coming. This was the Valkyrie way. They did not announce themselves. They did not send warnings or demands. They simply studied their targets for years, learning everything about them, finding every weakness. Then, when the time was right, they appeared from nowhere and destroyed everything. It was clean. It was efficient. It was how the galaxy worked when no one was watching. "The fleet is in position," his second officer reported. 2,000 ships in the outer debris field. All vessels confirmed successful cloaking. The Zark allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction. The Ur cloud, as humans called it, was perfect for hiding an invasion force. Billions of chunks of ice and rock drifted in the darkness, far from the warmth of the sun. His ships sat among them like predators waiting in tall grass, invisible to any sensor the galaxy had ever produced. The Valkyrie phase cloaking technology was their greatest achievement. It bent light and energy around their ships, making them impossible to see. It blocked their heat signatures. It absorbed their radio signals. For 15,000 years, no species had ever detected a cloaked Valkyrie fleet. The technology was considered perfect. "Show me their defenses again," the Sark ordered. The holographic display changed to show the human solar system. Earth sat in the middle, surrounded by its colonies on Mars, the moons of Jupiter, and the stations orbiting Saturn. Red markers showed the positions of human military vessels. There were not many of them. 300 warships total, the officer said. Mostly patrol craft for protecting merchant vessels. Their largest battleship is less than half the size of our smallest cruiser. Their weapons are standard galactic models, purchased from the merchant guilds. Nothing we have not seen before. And their detection systems? Also standard. Electromagnetic sensors, the basic gravitational monitors, visual scanning arrays. The same technology every species uses. They will not see us until we want them to see us. The Zark nodded slowly. This was what he expected. When humanity first made contact with the galactic community 300 years ago, they had been eager to join. They bought technology from the older species. They adopted galactic standards for everything from communication to transportation. They were good students, learning quickly and fitting in smoothly. But being good students had a cost. When you adopt someone else's technology, you stop developing your own. You trust in the wisdom of those who came before you. You believe that the tools they give you are the best tools possible. The Valkyrie knew better. They had developed their own tools, their own weapons, their own ways of hiding in the darkness. And no one had ever thought to look for something that should not exist. "The attack begins in 6 days, the Sark announced. "We will decloak at the asteroid belt and advance in standard formation. Earth and Mars fall first. Then we clean up the outer colonies. Total operation time is estimated at 14 hours. And survivors, Commander? There will be no survivors. Humanity ends today. In a generation, the galaxy will forget they ever existed. It was not cruelty that drove this decision. It was practicality. Dead species could not warn others. Dead species could not seek revenge. Dead species could not tell anyone about the monsters hiding in the dark. This was how the Valkyrie stayed invisible. They left no witnesses. Far away, on a planet the Valkyrie considered already dead, something unexpected was happening. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was having a very bad night. She worked at the Deep Space Monitoring Center, buried under a mountain in what used to be called Colorado. Her job was simple and boring. She watched data streams from sensors scattered across the solar system, looking for anything unusual. In 8 years of work, she had never found anything unusual. Tonight, her coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago. She did not notice. Her eyes were fixed on a graph that showed gravitational readings from the outer solar system. The readings were wrong. She checked the sensor. It was working perfectly. She checked the data processing systems. No errors. She checked the backup sensors. They showed the same thing. Something was out there. Something with mass. Something that was trying very hard not to be seen. The disturbances were tiny, barely visible in the data. Natural objects drifting through space would not create patterns like this. These patterns were too regular, too organized. They formed shapes that nature did not make. I sent a report to her supervisor. He replied that it was probably a sensor malfunction. She should run diagnostics and not worry about it. She worried about it. She pulled data from other sensors, all ones that most people had forgotten about. Neutrino detectors built decades ago. Gravitational wave observatories that floated in orbit around the sun. Strange instruments that measured things most scientists did not think were important. Every sensor told the same story. Something was hiding in the Oort cloud. Something big. Something that should not be there. She escalated her report. And again. And again. Each time, someone told her she was wrong. Each time, she refused to believe them. Finally, her report reached a place it was never supposed to reach. A woman with gray hair read it carefully, made a phone call, and said 5 words that changed everything. She found them. Bring her in. 12 hours later, Yuki stood in a facility that did not exist, looking at a display that showed 2,000 red dots surrounding her solar system. A man in uniform stood beside her. We have known about them for 6 weeks, he said. We have been watching them watch us. And we have been preparing. Yuki stared at the red dots. Each one was a warship. Each one was filled with creatures who wanted to kill everyone she had ever known. Preparing for what? She asked. The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. For war. The kind of war they will never forget. In the Oort cloud, Supreme Commander the Sark reviewed his plans one final time. Everything was perfect. The humans suspected nothing. In 6 days, they would learn what happened to species that attracted Valkyrie attention. He was wrong, but he would not discover how wrong until the fire came for his fleet. The facility was called Argus, named after a giant from old human stories who had 100 eyes and never slept. Yuki thought the name was perfect. The place felt like something that had been watching forever. She followed Director Harrison through corridors that went deeper and deeper underground. Each door required different codes, different scans, different permissions. By the time they reached the main control room, she felt like she had passed through 100 gates into a world that existed alongside her own, but had never touched it. The control room was enormous. Hundreds of people sat at stations, watching screens filled with data that Yuki did not recognize. The main display covered an entire wall, showing the solar system in detail she had never seen before. Thousands of tiny markers covered everything, from the sun to the furthest reaches of the Oort cloud. And there, glowing red among the ice and rock, were 2,000 dots arranged in perfect formation. The Valkyrie shrouded armada, Harrison said. phase-cloaked warships using technology the galaxy considers impossible. They have been in position for 6 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. How do you see them? Yuki asked. Their cloaking should make them invisible to everything. Harrison smiled. It was the smile of someone sharing a secret they had kept for too long. When humanity joined the galactic community, we did everything they expected. We bought their technology. We adopted their standards. We smiled and nodded at their meetings. But we never stopped being human. We never stopped being afraid of what might be hiding in the dark. He gestured at the displays around them. This is what fear built. 7 generations of scientists, engineers, and soldiers, all working in absolute secrecy. While the rest of humanity used galactic technology, we developed our own. We asked questions that the older species thought were silly. We built sensors that they said were impossible. We prepared for threats that they promised did not exist. Yuki looked at the red dots on the display. 6 weeks. They had known for 6 weeks that death was coming, and they had told no one. The rest of humanity had gone about their lives, working and laughing and loving, never knowing that monsters were gathering at their door. Why keep it secret? She asked. Why not warn everyone? Because panic helps no one. And because we needed time to prepare our response. Harrison's smile faded. The Valkyrie have destroyed 17 civilizations. Each time, they appeared from nowhere, struck without warning, and left no survivors. The galaxy knows about them but pretends they do not exist. It is easier to look away than to face something you cannot fight. But we can fight them? We can do more than fight them. We can teach them fear. A door opened behind them, and everyone in the room stood at attention. Yuki turned to see a woman in a military uniform walking toward them. She was perhaps 50 years old, with short black hair and eyes that seemed to look through everything they saw. Admiral Chun, Harrison said. This is Dr. Tanaka. She spotted the gravitational traces in the standard monitoring systems. Admiral Chen Wheelin studied Yuki for a long moment. Good eyes. Most people would have dismissed that data as noise. You kept pushing until someone listened. I couldn't ignore it, Yuki said. The patterns were too regular, too organized. That instinct will serve you well here. Chun turned to the main display. Status report. An officer responded immediately. Enemy fleet remains in position. All 2,000 ships are accounted for. They appear to be waiting for some kind of signal or schedule. Our preparations? Complete. All platforms are armed and ready. Ghost Fleet is in position. Mercury Array is at full power. Titan reserves are loaded and waiting. Yuki listened to the reports and felt her mind racing. She recognized some of what they were describing. The Mercury Array was supposed to be a power station. The Titan reserves were supposedly fuel storage. Now she understood that these innocent-looking facilities were weapons, hidden in plain sight for centuries. What exactly are we going to do? She asked. Admiral Chun turned to face her. We are going to let them attack. We are going to let them think they have succeeded in their approach. And then we are going to show them what happens when you threaten humanity. Why not attack first? We know where they are, because the galaxy is watching. If we strike first, we become the aggressors. We become the threat that other species need to fear. But if we defend ourselves against an unprovoked attack, we are simply survivors. Chun's voice hardened. And when we are done surviving, the Valkyrie will carry our message back to every corner of the galaxy. They will tell everyone what happens when you come for Earth. Yuki understood then. This was not just about defeating an enemy. This was about sending a message so clear, so terrifying, that no one would ever try this again. She was assigned a station where she could monitor the approaching fleet. For 4 days, she watched the red dots drift slowly closer. 4 days of knowing that death was coming. that the people she loved had no idea what was about to happen. 4 days of trusting that the weapons hidden throughout the solar system would be enough. Around her, the Argus staff worked in calm efficiency. They had prepared for this moment for generations. Every weapon had been tested. Every scenario had been planned. Every possible response had been calculated and practiced. They were not nervous. They were ready. On the 5th day, the Valkyrie fleet began its final approach. They moved from the Oort cloud into the outer solar system, still cloaked, still invisible to any normal sensor. Supreme Commander the Sark gave his final orders, confident that his perfect formation would sweep through human space like fire through dry grass dot in the Argus control room. Admiral Chun watched the red dots move closer. Her face showed nothing, but her hands gripped the rail in front of her until her knuckles turned white. "All stations," she said quietly, "prepare for contact. Remember what we are fighting for. Remember who we are protecting. And remember that we have waited 300 years for this moment." The red dots reached the asteroid belt. The Valkyrie fleet decloaked, appearing like demons from the void, weapons charging, ready to begin the slaughter. They had 4 seconds to enjoy their confidence. Then humanity answered. The recording spread across the galaxy like fire across dry grass. Every species with access to galactic communications watched the same footage. They saw 2,000 Valkyrie warships appear from cloaking, confident and ready for slaughter. They saw those ships destroyed by weapons that should not exist. They saw the pursuit, the hunt, the methodical destruction of a fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for 15,000 years. And they saw the 19 survivors allowed to leave, carrying humanity's message to the stars. The effect was immediate and profound. On worlds across the galaxy, leaders gathered to discuss what they had witnessed. The Valkyrie had been feared for millennia. They were the monsters that no one could stop, the threat that everyone pretended did not exist. Species had been destroyed while the galactic community looked away, too afraid to interfere. Now a young species, barely 3 centuries into their galactic journey, had broken the monsters. The implications were staggering. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the great chamber, their conversations creating a buzz of sound that echoed off the ancient walls. For the first time in history, humanity was invited to address the full assembly not as newcomers, but as a power to be respected. Ambassador Sarah Okonkwo walked to the central podium and looked out at the gathered representatives. Some watched her with new respect. Others watched with fear. A few watched with hatred, already seeing humanity as the new threat to be contained. She had prepared her speech for days, choosing each word with care. This moment would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. 300 years ago, she began, humanity joined this community. We were young and eager. We wanted to learn from the great civilizations that had existed for thousands of years before us. We wanted to fit in, to be accepted, to earn our place among the stars. She paused, letting the silence grow heavy. You taught us many things. You shared your technology. You welcomed us to your markets and your meetings. But you also lied to us. You told us the galaxy was safe. You told us that the days of extinction were over. You told us that species did not simply vanish anymore. Her voice hardened. 17 species died while we were being told these lies. The Valkyrie destroyed them one by one, and this council did nothing. You knew what they were doing. You knew and you chose to look away, because you were afraid. Because it was easier to sacrifice others than to face a threat you could not fight. She looked directly at the Valkyrie delegation, who sat in shamed silence at the back of the chamber. We were not afraid. While you taught us to trust in your protection, we watched the darkness between stars. We built sensors that you said were impossible. We created weapons that you said could not exist. We prepared for an attack that you promised would never come. Ambassador Okonkwo stepped forward, her voice rising. You called us paranoid because we watched the skies. You called us primitive because we chose weapons over comfort. You called us warlike because we remembered our own bloody history. You were right about all of it. We are paranoid. We are primitive. We are warlike. And we are still here when 17 other species trusted your protection and are now nothing but ashes and memory. The chamber was completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Humanity does not ask for your approval. We do not need your permission to defend ourselves. We will continue to watch the darkness. We will continue to prepare for threats. We will continue to fight anyone who tries to destroy us. She softened her voice slightly. But we also offer you something. Any species that wants to stand with us, that wants to build real defenses against real dangers, will find humanity ready to help. We are not conquerors. We are not destroyers. We are survivors. And we would rather have friends than enemies. She turned and walked out of the chamber without waiting for a response. The days that followed were chaotic. The Velkari Dominion, faced with the undeniable evidence of their defeat, sent representatives to negotiate peace. They had no choice. The 19 survivors had told their story, and that story had broken something in the Velkari spirit. For 15,000 years, they had believed themselves invisible and unstoppable. Now they knew that at least one species could see them, find them, destroy them. The peace terms were harsh. The Velkari would pay reparations to the families of the 17 destroyed species. They would surrender their cloaking technology to the galactic authorities. They would never approach human space without permission. In exchange, humanity would not come for their homeworld. Some Velkari wanted to refuse. They wanted to build more ships and try again. But their leaders understood what the warriors did not. Humanity had shown only a fraction of their true capabilities. No one knew what other weapons they had hidden, what other secrets they kept. Starting another war would mean risking everything on the hope that they could win against an enemy that had already beaten them decisively. They chose peace because they were afraid. And that fear was exactly what Admiral Chen had wanted. 3 months after the battle, Chen visited a memorial built in orbit around Earth. It was a simple ring of steel, floating against the blue and white backdrop of the planet, with 37 names inscribed on its surface. These were the humans who had died in the battle. 37 lives lost to save billions. She read each name aloud, as she did every week. She owed them that. She owed them everything. When she finished, she stood in silence, looking down at the world she had sworn to protect. Cities glittered on the night side. Billions of people lived their lives, most of them never knowing how close they had come to extinction. That was how it should be. Ordinary people should not have to carry the weight of what might have been. That weight was for soldiers to bear. A young officer approached her. "Admiral, the construction teams report that the new defense platforms are ahead of schedule. Full coverage of the outer system within 18 months. Chan nodded. Good. What else? Several species have requested meetings to discuss defense cooperation. The Thrillian Confederacy wants to talk about shared sensor networks. The merchant guilds are interested in our full drive technology. Schedule the meetings. We will listen to what they have to say." The officer hesitated. "Admiral, can we trust them, after everything?" Chun finally turned to face him. She looked tired, older than her years, carrying a weight that would never fully lift. "No," she said. "We cannot trust anyone. That is the lesson humanity learned long ago, when we were still killing each other with sharpened stones. Trust is a luxury. Preparation is survival." She looked back at the stars, but we can work with them. We can build alliances. We can show them that humanity is worth having as a friend and dangerous to have as an enemy. That is how we survive. Not by hiding, not by hoping the monsters will leave us alone, by being stronger than the monsters, by making them afraid of us. The officer left her alone with the darkness. Somewhere in that darkness, listening posts continued their eternal watch. Sensors that could see across light years gathered data and sent it home. Weapons platforms waited in cold silence, ready to wake at a moment's notice. Humanity had learned that peace was just a space between wars. New threats would come. New enemies would rise. The universe was vast and old, and full of dangers that had not yet shown themselves. But humanity would be ready, watching, preparing, never forgetting that survival was not given but earned, and they intended to earn it every single day, for as long as the stars burned in the endless sky. Supreme Commander the Sark stood on his bridge and watched his fleet appear from cloaking like a wave of death rising from the ocean. 2,000 warships arranged in perfect formation, weapons hot and ready. Behind them lay the cold emptiness of space. Before them lay Earth and all its colonies, helpless and unaware. "All ships report ready," his officer announced. No response from human defenses. "They have not detected us." The Zark felt a familiar satisfaction. It was always the same. The moment of revealing when the prey finally saw the predator. The fear, the desperation, the futile attempts to run or fight. He had watched 3 species die this way. Humans would be the 4th. All ships advance. Primary targets are Earth and Mars. Leave nothing alive. The armada began to move. Engines burned bright against the stars. 600 ships formed the front wave, with the rest following in careful layers. It was a formation designed to crush any resistance, to overwhelm any defense. It had never failed. Then the universe exploded. The first warning was a flash of light from behind the fleet. Then another. Then hundreds more, spreading across the darkness like stars being born. Before any officer could report what was happening, the first impacts arrived. They were rocks. Simple rocks, chunks of ice and stone from the Oort cloud. But they were moving at speeds that turned them into weapons more powerful than any missile. Platforms hidden among the debris for 200 years had awakened, their magnetic rails accelerating asteroids to nearly half the speed of light. At such speeds, even a small rock carried the energy of a nuclear weapon. Ships vanished. There was no explosion, no fire, no dramatic death. The rocks simply punched through them like needles through paper, leaving nothing but expanding clouds of debris. 80 ships died in the first 3 seconds. The Sark grabbed his command chair as his flagship shook from a nearby impact. "Report. What is attacking us?" "Unknown weapons from the outer system. We are being hit from behind." "Impossible." Our sensors showed nothing there. But the sensors had lied. The sensors saw only what they expected to see. They looked for heat, for energy, for the signs of technology that the galaxy knew. The Oort platforms produced none of these things. They were cold, dark machines that had waited in frozen silence for centuries, powered by the slow decay of radioactive elements. They had no heat signature because they barely produced heat. They had no energy signature because they stored their power in physical systems, not electrical ones. Humanity had built weapons that did not look like weapons. And now those weapons were awake. Before the Sark could issue new orders, the second attack came. This time, the death came from the inner system. On Mercury, the closest planet to the Sun, enormous mirrors turned toward the Valkyrie fleet. The Mercury array was officially a power station, collecting solar energy and sending it to the colonies. But the mirrors could do more than collect energy. They could focus it. They could aim it. They could turn the fury of a star into a beam of destruction to cross space at the speed of light. The beam hit the Valkyrie formation like the finger of an angry god. Ships did not explode. They melted. Armor that could withstand nuclear weapons turned to liquid and then to vapor in less than a second. The beams swept across the fleet, leaving a trail of burning wreckage and dying screams. 120 ships died before the array needed to recharge. Space Orc watched his beautiful formation dissolve into chaos. Ships scattered in every direction, trying to escape the beams from the sun and the rocks from behind. His tactical display was covered in warnings and damage reports. This was not supposed to happen. This could not be happening. All ships, activate cloaking. Scatter formation. Find cover in the asteroid belt. The surviving ships shimmered and vanished, their phase cloaking technology bending reality around them. For 15,000 years, this had been their salvation. When things went wrong, they simply disappeared. No one could fight what they could not see. The ghost fleet appeared from the asteroid belt like shadows taking solid form. They were human ships, but not like any the Valkyrie had seen before. Black holes with no running lights, no heat signature, no electromagnetic emissions. They had been hiding among the rocks for decades, cold and silent and patient, waiting for an enemy that might never come. Now the enemy had come, and the ghosts were hungry. The human ships did not care about Valkyrie cloaking. They tracked their targets using sensors that measured things the Valkyrie had never considered. Gravitational distortions caused by moving mass, neutrino emissions from active reactors, the displacement of dark matter as large objects passed through space. A cloaked ship could hide from light, but it could not hide from the universe itself. Missiles launched from the Ghost Fleet. Each one carried a tiny amount of antimatter, barely enough to see. When antimatter touched regular matter, both were destroyed and converted into pure energy. The explosions were small but absolute. Valkyrie ships that had survived for centuries, that had conquered entire civilizations, were erased from existence in flashes of white fire. Space Orc screamed orders that no one could follow. His fleet was being torn apart from every direction. The rocks from behind, the beam from the sun, the ghosts from the asteroids. And now, rising from the rings of Saturn, a new wave of death. The antimatter torpedoes had been built in secret factories on Titan, one of Saturn's moons. They had been stored in the frozen rings, disguised as natural ice, waiting for exactly this moment. Now they launched by the hundreds, crossing the battlefield in minutes, finding their targets with terrible precision. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, 600 Valkyrie ships were destroyed or dying. The survivors scattered in every direction, all thoughts of conquest forgotten. They ran for the edge of the system, desperate to escape into hyperspace and carry news of this disaster back to their homeworld Dodd in the Argus Command Center. Admiral Chun watched the enemy flee. Her face showed no emotion. Her voice was steady and cold. "Admiral," an officer reported, "enemy fleet is in full retreat. Approximately 1,500 ships remain. They are making for the outer system. If they reach minimum jump distance, they can escape." The Galactic Convention said that retreating enemies should be allowed to go. It was civilized. It was proper. It was how things were done. Chun remembered the 17 species the Valkyrie had destroyed. She remembered that not one of them had been given the chance to retreat. "Contact the Ghost Fleet," she said. "New orders. No one leaves." Space Orc had never known fear like this. For 300 years, he had been a predator. He had hunted species across the galaxy, appearing from nowhere to destroy everything they loved. He had watched worlds burn and felt nothing but satisfaction at a job well done. Now he was the prey. And the feeling was terrible. His flagship raced toward the edge of the solar system, engines pushed beyond their safe limits. Around him, the survivors of his fleet scattered in every direction, each ship trying to find its own path to safety. They needed to reach minimum distance from the sun to activate their faster-than-light drives. Once they jumped to hyperspace, they would be safe. They could go home, rebuild, and return with a force so massive that even these horrible humans could not stop them. Time to jump distance? The Sark demanded. 43 minutes, Commander. The human ships are pursuing, but they are too slow. They cannot catch us. The Zark allowed himself a moment of hope. Human technology was inferior to Velkari engineering. Their ships were slower, their drives less efficient. If his fleet could stay ahead for less than an hour, they would survive. Then new contacts appeared on his sensors. Not behind them, ahead of them. Commander, ships emerging directly in our escape path. The Zark stared at the display and felt his hope die. Human vessels were appearing from empty space, materializing in positions that should have been impossible to reach. They were not coming from any planet or station. They were simply appearing, as if space itself was delivering them to exactly where they needed to be, because it was. The Valkyrie understood faster than light travel. Their drives pushed ships through hyperspace, a dimension where the normal rules of distance did not apply. It was reliable technology, tested over millennia, used by every species in the galaxy. Human scientists had developed something different. Their experimental drives did not push ships through hyperspace. They folded normal space around the ship, bringing distant points together like folding a piece of paper. It was dangerous technology that required enormous amounts of energy and could tear a ship apart if calibrated incorrectly. But it was also instant. A ship using a fold drive could appear anywhere in the solar system without crossing the space between. The humans had been hiding these ships, waiting for exactly this moment. Now they appeared in front of the retreating fleet, behind them, beside them. Every escape route was blocked. Every path to safety was closed. Admiral Chun's voice came through on every frequency, translated into the Valkyrie language so there could be no misunderstanding. Attention Valkyrie fleet. This is Admiral Chun Wei-Lin of Earth Defense Command. You came to kill our children while they slept. You believed we would never see you coming. You believed wrong. There is no escape from this system. There is no mercy for those who show none. Surrender now or face destruction. The Zark listened to the message and felt something cold spreading through his body. This was not how war was supposed to work. When an enemy retreated, you let them go. That was the law that every civilized species followed. Fighting to the death served no purpose. It wasted resources and created hatred that lasted for generations. He opened the channel to respond. You cannot do this. The galactic conventions require you to allow retreating forces to withdraw. If you destroy us, the Council will condemn you. Every species will see you as monsters. Chun's reply came immediately. The Council did nothing while you murdered 17 civilizations. They knew what you were, and they looked away. Their opinion means nothing to us. We are no longer a threat to you. We are leaving. Let us go and this can end. You were never going to let this end. Chun's voice was cold and hard as stone. You were going to run home and build more ships. You were going to come back with a larger fleet. You would have kept coming until you destroyed us or we destroyed you. We are simply choosing to end this now. This is murder. No, this is survival. You came to exterminate our species. You have done this 17 times before. You will never do it again. The transmission ended. A moment later, the human ships opened fire. The battle in the outer system was not a fight. It was a hunt. Human vessels appeared wherever the Valkyrie tried to run, blocking them, surrounding them, driving them back toward the waiting guns. The Ghost Fleet pressed from behind while the full-drive ships appeared ahead. There was nowhere to go. Valkyrie ships tried to fight back, but their weapons seemed useless. Human ships moved in ways that should not be possible, dodging attacks before they were fired. They seemed to know what the Valkyrie would do before they did it, and perhaps they did. Human intelligence services had studied Valkyrie tactics for generations. They had watched recordings of previous conquests, analyzed patterns, predicted responses. Every move this arc made was a move the humans had expected. Every tactic he tried was a tactic they had prepared to counter. Some Valkyrie ships surrendered. They dropped their weapons, broadcast their surrender on all frequencies, and waited to be captured. These ships were boarded by human marines and their crews taken prisoner. They would be treated fairly, according to galactic law. Humanity was not cruel, but most ships tried to fight or flee. These ships died. One by one, they were hunted down and destroyed. Missiles and beams found them no matter where they ran. The darkness that had always protected the Valkyrie now offered no safety at all. This arc watched his fleet disappear from his display. 2,000 ships had entered this system. Now there were hundreds, then dozens, then less. When it was over, 19 ships remained. They were surrounded, damaged, unable to fight or run. This arc stood on his ruined bridge and waited for the final shot that would end his life. It did not come. Instead, Admiral Chun's voice returned. You will return to your dominion. You will tell your leaders what happened here. You will tell them that humanity sees all, reaches all, and forgives nothing. If the Valkyrie ever threaten human space again, we will not wait for you to come to us. We will come for you. We will find your worlds. We will end your threat forever. The 19 ships were allowed to leave. They limped away into hyperspace, carrying their message of defeat back to the heart of the Valkyrie Empire. In the Argus control room, Dr. Yuki Tanaka watched them go. She had seen the entire battle, every death, every explosion, every moment of the slaughter. She felt sick and relieved and terrified all at once. Why let them go? She asked Admiral Chun. They will tell everyone what we can do. Chun turned to look at her with eyes that had seen too much death. That is exactly why we let them go. Dead enemies tell no stories. Living enemies spread fear. And right now, fear is the greatest weapon we have. She turned back to the display, showing the empty space where the Valkyrie fleet had been. The galaxy will hear about this. Every species will know what happens when you threaten humanity. And maybe, just maybe, they will decide that we are better as friends than enemies. The hunt was over. The reckoning was about to begin.